religious kind of way of talking, one is a little recount, a biographical, and these are all encompassed within a sentence. When we think about the history of writing, I think we need to sort of say, well, what are the social conditions of the time in which we're actually looking at writing, and how do they affect the kind of thing that the units of writing are? These two things go together. And here's another example from the same period, but in terms of class, very different. This is from another religious tract by John Milton, called Ketika, where he talks about he kind of writes against censorship. And again, listen to, I mean, not that I'm a good performer of Milton's prose writing, but listen to the kind of where this writing might have had its origin as writing, but also look again at this very sort of simple notion of, seemingly simple notion of the sentence. He writes, "Good and evil we know in the field of this world grow up together almost inseparably. And knowledge of good is so involved in interwoven with the knowledge of evil that in so many cunning resemblances hardly to discern, that those confused seeds which were imposed on psyche as an incessant labour to cull out and sort sunder were not more intermixed. It was from out of the right evil as two twins cleaving together leapt forth into the world. And perhaps this is that doom which Adam fell into, of knowing good and evil, that is to say, of knowing good by evil. That's therefore the state of man now is. What wisdom can there be to choose, what confidence to be forbear, without the knowledge of evil. He that can apprehend and consider vice with all abates and seeming pleasures, and yet abstain, and yet distinguish, and yet prefer that which is truly better, he is the true warfaring Christian." So it comes from a very specific form of not just writing, but I think also talking, yeah, and a very specific sort of university-trained manner of setting forth an argument in logical terms, kind of by oppositions, by negations, and by again it's oratory translated into writing. Very different to Anna Trapnell, not that change from, say, the religious inflected language to the class-inflected, the lower class-inflected language. Not that kind of change, it's a more consistent tone, but it comes from somewhere, and comes, of course, from university training in the classics. So these things are side by side. You can see that Milton's sentences are very long, they're differently organized to Anna Trapnell's. Okay, so another example in the history of writing, and now much closer to home. When I got to London to my present job in 1991, the Institute of Education, which is part of the University of London, had a little prospectus of its courses and of what it offered, its organisation, and the contents pages looked like that. I was quite astonished by this. I mean, that looked to me, that was 1991. I thought it looked more like the 1960s, but gee, that was a name. Here is a page from the prospectus itself. So in 1991, an institution which even then prided itself on being sort of significant in the world of education, presented itself in that fashion to the world. And again, I want to sort of say, what does that say about the social relation between the institution and the world that it seemed to be addressing, to be using this form of representation? What speaks here? What kinds of interests speak here? I think the interest that speaks here says, well, it's an inward-looking interest. It's an interest in which the market doesn't exist. You don't have to kind of think about marketing yourself, because there are established structures between the social world and your own institution, and people travel in well-known kind of channels towards your institution because they're in this place, in this professional place in the world, and they want to come to you, and you don't have to market yourself. It is still the world in which language is absolutely central and absolutely dominant. there's also a world in which the state and its meanings and its values are dominant in the institution as a kind of part of that state can represent itself like that. I have to say that I thought even then that was highly unrealistic way of thinking about the world, but it was still possible. Like it didn't fold up, it didn't close down, it didn't become kind of redundant, or somebody else came along and said excuses, but that you outlived your use by date. I said we need to change, and we then changed, but we changed not at that time to a web-based presentation, but to more colorful kind of PR conscious material. The Institute of Education, if we had internet access in here, I would show you the most recent of its home page. So this is about 3 years or more old, and its design is probably about 8 years old. But I want to make that contrast in terms of writing between what you saw here, in terms of setting out the contents of the website, and here in terms of the actual content set out and what has now happened. What has now happened is, of course, that you've become more, user-friendly or more user-oriented. You have to appeal to the market, pretend that this is actually some lovely English countryside and tranquil. In fact, it's in the middle of London, but that's just one kind of thing. And over on one side here, you see the very modern kind of modernist building, bottom left corner there. So you kind of construct an image of the institution now, which is constructed as much through image, or maybe more through image, than it is through writing. And also because the appeal now is different to the appeal that you had before. The appeal is now to a market. You're conscious that you actually have to be out there and sell yourself. But the first means of address to the clients, to the market, to the consumers, to the customers, maybe even to the students, is via image. And the place of language is now a very different place. So the place of writing is now actually subsidiary to, marginal to the place of image, at least on the home page of this thing. Okay. Let me give you 2 more examples. Now, those of you who heard me yesterday will have seen some of these already, so please forgive me for that. But 2 textbooks in science. This one from 1936. Yes, there is an image there, and yes, there is writing there, and the relation of image and writing is maybe that of illustration, because these magnetic fields, or these kinds of magnetic fields, have also already been described beforehand. So they are there in a sense to make something which has already been written about visually present, and maybe by making it visually present, making it more memorable. So it's not new information which is being added to the page, but information is being repeated in a different form. So this is 1936. By 1988, the textbook for the same age group, that is 13 to 14-year-olds, looks like this. The pages look like this. Now, I think there's much more image on the pages of the 1988 textbook than there is on the 1936 textbook. But the significant change, I mentioned yesterday, is not so much the presence of image, but rather what image does. Whereas in 1936, if the student had read the written text, it's a he because the author said this book being kind of richly illustrated, he said, will be interesting for the boy to